I've pretty much just had a cup of tea with everybody as a starting point, which gives me the opportunity to convey my thoughts, beliefs and values across to them. But more importantly than that, it gives me an insight into their environments. And if I can do that in their environment, then I think that's a good starting point, because not only will you hear the words, but actually you will see it around. So I've put a picture of Donamana Cricket Club in there, and I spent a whole day there when I first got to Cricket Island, because Adrian Birrell, he's up in the top left-hand corner of the screen there, he talked to me about this principle of having a cup of tea with everybody, and actually he talked about having a cup of tea with the prickly ones, the ones that might be getting in the way. And the guy on his right-hand side is a guy called Philip Frost, who was my groundsman at Somerset, who is now the groundsman at Malahide, down at the international ground. There may be something in that. But he was a fantastic groundsman, but had a very, very difficult relationship with the previous coach at Somerset, who I was his assistant coach. And so the first thing that I did when I was offered the job, I think it was in September 2004, was to organise that every Friday afternoon, myself and Frosty would sit in his little shed, and it was so tight, it was ridiculous, have tea out of his urn, and he would talk me through his life and his working frustrations and what I could do to help him. And I learned more about seed and rotation of pitches and scarifying and all of that, some of which, you know, wasn't really that interesting to me, but the bottom line was I was engaging with him, and as a result I had a very good relationship with him. And when I wanted to ask him to change a pitch or to move the to a different part of the ground so we can employ a different tactic, he was absolutely on side and did everything. And you know, I really valued that relationship, but that came from having lots of cups of tea. So when I went to Ireland and AD said, I think you should have a cup of tea with everybody that you possibly can, I basically did a road trip for 24 months, getting in my car. I'm not sure Warren Ducham appreciated the expenses claims, but it definitely did the job in getting around and appreciating everybody's different nuance and situation. And you know, the Northern Cricket Union I work with incredibly closely, and it's brilliant. I think I saw that Andy McRae is on the line. And Andy was one of those guys, along with Brian Walsh, who I connected with a heap whilst I was there. And one of the reasons that I made a real investment into the Northern Cricket Union is because they'd been doing great stuff for a long, long time. And there was a sort of perception that I picked up on quite early that Cricket Island had come in, and it was as if they were sort of like saying, right, everybody has to do it our way. And that was a really dangerous position. I don't think that was intentional. I just think that was how it was perceived. And often perception is reality. So I got really close to the Northern Cricket Union because I saw that they were doing some brilliant things. I really liked the people that were up there and really enjoyed the clubs that I connected with up there. But I spent a huge amount of time because I desperately wanted them to be on side, and I wanted to learn from their previous experience, and cups of tea and sometimes occasionally a Guinness or two were the way in on that. So get to know everybody you're working with is my other thing. Again, it's not rocket science, but the more you invest in that, the more you get out of it. And that's the same with players. It's the same in my world now with parents. You know, get to know my parents, have regular conversations with them, you know, invite them for a cup of tea at the clubhouse or whatever. I think it's really important to do all of that. And you know, my biggest advice on parents would be to have regular and little conversations on as often as you possibly can, because otherwise what tends to happen, and I think we've all experienced this in coaching, is if we don't do that, then something bigger will come along, and it's like a train, a runaway train going sometimes with parents. So I'd rather stay on top of it with cups of tea. Challenging and supporting young athletes, and my young athletes now, we've got Jess on the right hand side, who's I think she's doing she was meant to be doing her GCSEs this year. Obviously that isn't looking like it's going to happen now, but you know, she's a fantastic girl cricketer at our school. We've got a load of girl cricketers, and it's been one of the great things about being at school and helping to develop that in a rapidly changing world of women's and girls cricket and women and girls sport for that matter. And then the one on the left-hand side is me coaching actually out in St Lucia, which is another little job that I do. I take people off on holiday, and myself and Andrew Strauss and Graham Swan go and coach them. And there I'm talking about how the ball travels through the air and the line of sight when you're throwing a cricket ball, but I'm trying to do it in relation to some 8-year-olds. And in fact, the one sitting in front of me is actually Andrew Strauss's son, who had no interest in cricket whatsoever at the time, but has now. So hopefully that lesson of throwing might have helped him along the way. But ultimately, I've got a few tips, I suppose, from experience. And the first one would be when you're challenging and supporting young athletes, and this is the same for adults as well, is don't be afraid to have the tough conversation. I think tough conversations in a proactive fashion are really, really good. The reactive ones are often when somebody's got injured, when they got dropped, when they're in the depths of a loss of form. My view would be to get on board as early as you possibly can. And it's time exhaustive, it's energy, you know, your energy is drained through doing it, but ultimately you are helping that person as best as you can. And one of the reasons why tough conversations can be had even with younger ones is that they're so much more resilient than we give them credit for. They're so much more robust, and as long as we're giving that message in a way that they feel that they're cared for, that they're that is empathetic, then we don't tend to have too many problems. And you know, it's tough having those conversations initially, but again, the more you expose them to it, the better they become at it, and the better they then bounce back. Obviously, each case is individual, and it takes a different amount of time, you know, each time you have these types of conversations. But I think that too many people steer away from them, and actually, my experience has been they're far more robust and rigorous than I initially gave them credit for. So get stuck in would be my first bit of advice. And I did that a long time ago with this little fellow who's a very young Josh Buttler in the top right-hand corner. He was a 12-year-old. I needed to challenge him because he kept scoring far too many runs in the under-12s for his school, his club, and his county with us at Somerset. The academy at Somerset was under 14 to under 18 at the time, and I had to convince the maestro of English cricket, the MD of English cricket, Hugh Morris, that we needed to get this kid onto the academy earlier because he needed to be stretched, he needed to be challenged. I couldn't afford him just to go on his merry way, dominating everything in his path for the next 2 years. He needed a little bit more. And it was tough. The first, I think, 10 weeks that I worked with him, he probably broke down in tears about 6 or 7 times, not because of the language or how I was behaving, just because of some of the things I was asking him to do. There's quite a famous bit on YouTube where he talks about me trying to change his batting grip in one of his master classes that he's done since. He does it in a lovely way. He's not having a go at me too much anyway, which is good. And basically every time I asked him to do something that was outside of his comfort zone, he turned around to look at the balcony up to his mum, who was always there watching. But mum was a tennis coach and she understood the coaching process. She was a very good coach. And she would turn around and turn away from him every time, so he never caught her eye. And over a period of time, he started to not look up to the balcony and actually to engage with me. And at that point, I knew that I could start to put something else onto him. So he used to bowl these little medium paces, which literally wouldn't get into a second 11 club side, but he thought he was quite good. And I asked him one day if he had anything else, and he said, well, no, not really, but I enjoy fielding. So I got him my wicket-keeping gloves and stuck them on his hands and made him keep wicket. And this was it was one way. I made him keep wicket, and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. He wanted to be in the field. He wanted to be running around. He wanted to be bowling. And I kept saying to him, just stick with it for 3 months. Give me 3 months. That's all I ask. Go with it. Let's keep doing some drills. Let's make it as fun as possible. But let's go with it. And one day you'll thank me. Well, the day he thanked me, I mean, he's thanked me a few times, but the day he thanked me, he sent me that picture, which was obviously in the Times the day after England won the World Cup, with a little thank you over the top of it. And he didn't need to do that because I felt very proud of him anyway. But I was tough enough back in the day to make him do that. And that sounds really brutal and really hard. But I recognised that he had the hallmarks of somebody who could do it if he practiced it enough. And he hasn't done too badly since. The other one is just recognising that feedback is a gift. And as long as you give it with the sole purpose of helping and supporting the recipient, you can't really go wrong. And you've got to create an environment around that they recognise that. And it's got to be done very carefully. It's got to be done at the right times. It's got to be done with good language. And you've probably got to give a little bit of time to the planning of it and then the execution of it as well. But then again, that goes back to the tough conversations, because a tough conversation is feedback. So just make sure that they understand that you're coming from a caring place, and that comes from the way that you deal with everybody. And I'm sure we're all going about that really well. But you know, it's a real gift, feedback. We're very lucky to be in that privileged position of being able to positively influence people. And equally, you know, we haven't always done it right. I certainly haven't always done it right. But when I have, which hopefully is most of the time, it's always with the sole purpose of helping and supporting that recipient and in their benefit. Which comes back to something that really impacted upon me. I retired from playing in '99. I got an opportunity because Malcolm Marshall, who was my mentor and coach, he got very ill with stomach cancer. And he asked me, I think I was 25, 26 at the time, he asked me to take over the captain, well, I was captain anyway, but take over the coaching of the second team, play and captain it. He came back towards the end of the season, so I just went back to playing. And then sadly, he knew he was going to pass away, and he passed away, I think, September, October, and I took the decision to retire at that point, not as a reaction. I've been thinking about it, to go into coaching because I enjoyed my experience so much. And he said to me that I was never going to play for England, but I might have an opportunity to coach them one day. So I thought, well, you know, let's give it a go. And I sat in the clubhouse and had a jacket potato, baked beans and salad, which was my staple fare back in the day at lunchtime. And my other coach, who'd coached me since I was 13, sat next to me and basically told me all the things that I should have done to become a better player. And I sat there and I took it, and it was, you know, I was very polite. But as I walked up, I thought, I'm never going to do that to a player. I want to make sure that I'm honest enough and brave enough to have a conversation with him or her when they can actually deal with it. And that was a big lesson for me. So I've always taken that on. And goes to Andy Flower, who's somebody I worked with England for 24 months, I think it was. I was with him, and you know, and he, to date, I'm sure it'll happen again at some point, he's the only bloke that's ever sacked me, but I've got absolutely no problem with that, because one of his lines was being fairly honest. And in those days of Moneyball, when it first came onto the scene, a bloke that took 3 goes to get his GCSE maths probably wasn't the best person to drive the statistics that were going to take the England team to world domination. So understandably, when he put it in that sort of way, I took it on the chin, and away I twaddled. You know, still being an England supporter and still being a fan of Andy Flower. But he talks about being fairly honest, in that we have to be fair and honest, because sometimes honesty can be a little bit too brutal, and I think that's a nice balance as well. And when you're talking with young players, being fairly honest, I think is a good way to go. So I liked his approach, and hence why I put it in there. And that's the happiest picture that I could find of Andy. And then the other thing that we do, and we do this heck of a lot at Millfield, is refer to the rocky road in sport, because I've not worked with anybody yet whose journey has started at under 12s and it's gone up and everything's gone flowingly until they've hit world domination, and then they've chosen the time that they retire. It doesn't work like that. And you know, Joss's example was working like that, and I didn't know this model back in the day, but I wanted to introduce a bit of bumpiness in his road, because I was a little bit worried that everything was just a little bit too plain sailing. And there's some brilliant research. Dave Collins up at the University of Central Lancashire, Amy McNamara, massive of that Irish lady, fantastic researcher and developer of models, is contributed to it. And you can see in that, just by reading about it, what the super athletes have achieved, and why they've achieved, and some of the commonality that sits between them. The one that has been debated in recent years since this has come out was the separated parents element, because the more research that I've done, the less they've recognised that was the massive one of the massive drivers initially in the research. Actually isn't so prevalent nowadays, but having high personal drive, athletes causing their own bumps in the road, changing their own drills, making them tougher. All of those things come really out of most stories that you read at an autobiographical level of the legends of the games, whichever sport that we're involved with. And looking on the right hand side, the people that have the talent, but don't generally do that brilliantly when it comes to the peak end of the game. We've seen thousands of those in all of our respective sports, I'm sure. And then there's some of the things that sit alongside it, and some of the parenting things, for example. And often these kids are the ones that are bigger. You know, certainly in my sport, the ones. Joss was that big. Alistair Cook, when I first worked with him at under 15, had nothing on him. He was about that thin, and he couldn't hit the ball off the square, Alistair. But he had a lot of the stuff on the left-hand side that made me think this guy's worth investing with, when some other coaches were telling me that he wasn't going to do it because he doesn't score enough runs because he can't hit the ball hard enough. Well, fortunately, you know, when I coached England in the 15s and he didn't score any runs for us, but we kept playing him anyway, I hope one day that I'd reconnect with him. And that day came in Nagpur in 2006 when he got off a plane from the West Indies. And Duncan Fletcher said to me, "Would you play this guy tomorrow in a test match?" And I said, "Well, I would, because he's got a lot of ticker and he's got a good head on him." And that was talking Fletcher's language. I knew Fletcher well enough to know how to influence him. And fortunately, Alistair went out there and scored 60 and 100 in his debut match, and then played 150 odd test matches consecutively without being dropped or getting injured. And he was kind enough to invite me up to the Oval to watch his last innings, where he duly got 100, which was a very special moment indeed. So, you know, if you look at that, Alistair Cook, the supers on that side of it, lots of bumps in his road, used feedback as an opportunity to stimulate his development, whereas we've all come across those ones that are highly talented that didn't quite make it on the right-hand side. So, and here's a journey, you know, here's a journey of somebody, I don't know who this person actually is, but it's a football player who ended up being very good. You could almost look at it, you know, as a Harry Kane would be an example of somebody who got put out on loan a heap of times, you know, had to wait his time, and then obviously has taken the world by storm in terms of his goal scoring. But that rocky road is very normal. It's very rare for us to have somebody who goes all the way through their journey and just keeps ticking boxes. Here's another one, Jack Leach, got one not out against Australia, which is probably the most famous thing he's noted for. 90 as a night watchman, but as a left-arm spinner, he's done incredibly well. And he was on the academy. He's the same age as Joss. He played age group cricket with Joss all the way through at Somerset, but got to 17, 18 and was released by Somerset after I'd left. When I put him on the academy, everybody said I shouldn't put him on the academy because he can't spin the ball, because the ball was too big and his hands were too small and he couldn't get his fingers around it and all of that stuff. But this kid had a lot of good stuff going on. He'd have been in that supers bit on the left-hand side. So again, I invested in that. I recognised that he had some characteristics that I thought were great. But he got sacked by Somerset, went off to Cardiff University, played a load of games whilst he was studying there, did well in those games. And then Somerset re-engaged him after playing in the second team a few times, and you know the rest is history. And he's now a bit of a cult hero. So he's a seriously good lad. But he had a lot of those characteristics on that left-hand side, and recognising that as talent, I think, is something that we're getting better at nowadays. And years ago, talent was you could hit it the hardest and what have you at younger age as well. I think all sports are switching on to that. You know, the quartile things around research around when you're born in a year and what that gives you, that's also helped as well. So if you're not familiar with those things, get stuck into the Rocky Road stuff, the Dave Collins stuff, and then also have a look at the quartile stuff in terms of when you're born. Then have a look at your own squads and teams and your own selections and over the years, and see how you've rated against those things. And you know, hopefully it can make us even better at picking what real talent is as we go forward. Challenging limited beliefs is something I think when we're challenging players, I hear a lot of statements, you know, and here's a few. Here's three that I've stuck up. I should score 100 every time I bat. Or on the other end of it, I'm just not consistent enough. Or if somebody's in a bad trot of form, I'll never get out of this bad run of form. You know, you hear these things all of the time, and ultimately they are limited beliefs. So I show them this graph whenever anybody comes up with any of these three things. You know, I should score 100 every game. And then I say, well, you know, have a look at this. This is Manhattan. So all of those lines going up are those are the actual scores that anybody's got. And this is through a very long career. You can see that it started in 89 and it finished beyond that. It finished way beyond 2008. I think it finished in 2013. this particular player's career. But every line is how many runs they got in innings, and you can see that there's some low ones, there's some patches of bad form. Look at that, there's like half a year, 3/4 of a year, and there's only one score really in that. The batting average is this blue line going up and down and zigzagging, and obviously, you know, that's not consistent. It's not a straight line. And you can see that they've dropped in and out in form. They're not consistent, and they certainly haven't scored 100 every single game, that is for sure. So I always show this graph to people when they come out with limited beliefs, because this is Sachin Tendulkar's graph. This is career in a nutshell. Those were his averages, those were his scores. And, you know, he scored 100 international hundreds, and nobody has got near that yet. You know, then maybe Steve Smith might get somewhere, or Virat might get somewhere. He won a World Cup. He had a 24-year international career. And then obviously for some people that are motivated slightly differently from those little records there, his net value is 175 million, which is pretty useful. And he's recognised as a cricketing god. And when you put the figures on it, you know, you can see the same patterns, but obviously you put the values on the left-hand side. But ultimately, when you go back, there's no consistency, because sport isn't consistent. You don't do stuff. You're not an 8 out of 10 player every week. You're certainly not a 10 out of 10 player every week. You're not going to score 100 every game. You're not going to get a hat trick every game. And equally, you are going to go through periods of bad form. I mean, it's inevitable, absolutely inevitable, and is demonstrated by the best player that I saw in my 7 years of international cricket, playing out in the middle. Then exposure to the next level, I think, is really important, to give people context, to give people understanding, and also to give them something to aim for as well. I think is vitally important, because often we can stay in our little fishbowl of where we're playing and doing all right and all of that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden we get to the next level, and it's really hard work. And a lot of people, particularly those almosts that we talked about earlier, will fall off the wagon and give up and say they can't do it, whereas the people that are more growth orientated, I suppose, the more supers, will see that as a challenge. But we have a load of people come into school. You know, we had Ireland women's team over with Australia women's and England women's last year, and we had all the boys and girls coming over and bowling, and a great context, great eye opener of what good looks like, both in terms of ability, but more importantly in terms of attitude. But you don't necessarily always have to be bowling or batting against these people like Somerset and Gloucestershire when they're in our environments to know where you are, or to recognise what the learnings are. And so we got one of our players, Joseph, in the middle here. You can see here. He just wrote some notes. He watched Gloucestershire practice for an hour and wrote some notes, and then put that in our team chat on Microsoft Teams to everybody. And you know, there's some really great stuff that he picked up out on there, and it makes an impact because it's come from a player rather than me. You know, I could say all that stuff, and they go, yeah, but I'm meant to say that. But this is a 14-year-old kid who watched Gloucestershire go through their stuff and then wrote that up. And again, that's incredibly powerful. So he's now got a better understanding. He's passed that on to his mates, some of which were in their bowling and batting against Gloucestershire, so they picked it up through that. But exposure to the next level and exposing parents to that as well is really important. And then the other stuff that I quite enjoy, the other models, is the Carol Dweck stuff. And if you're not familiar with growth and fixed mindsets and some of her language changes and reframes, then get involved in that. So growth mindset is looking at a situation and find some motivation from it. You know, oops, I've made a mistake, I'll fix it. I can do hard things. I can do this, I'll try, I won't give up. All of these things are great statements, and we hear them all the time. And they're the ones that we want to get, but often we don't. We hear the fixed mindset, I can't do this, I don't feel like it, this is too hard, this is boring, I hate this, I quit. We hear that a lot. And that's the challenging type of language that I think as coaches we've got to get the other side of and try and reframe that and provide a context around why we're doing things that are tough and challenging in order to get better. And there's a map of some of the situations whenever people have challenges. You know, the fixed mindset people will avoid the challenge. You know, they'll get an injury on a bleep test and all of that sort of stuff, or they'll put obstacles in their way, they'll give up easily. They see effort as being sort of like something which is uncool rather than being the thing that drives everything forward. That they won't listen to criticism and constructive criticism. They'll take that very personally. And you know, you're going to be able to see that anytime. It's on the internet. But this stuff is absolute gold dust. So get stuck into that. And then she also talks about the power of yet. So I'm not good enough. We've heard that a lot. Well, yeah, you're not good enough yet because you haven't done enough of the drills, all the right drills, in order to get there. So when we do the right drills, then you will be good enough. I can't do this yet. Well, yeah, because you're 13 years old, and you know, the best players in the world are often 30 years old in my sport, rather than 15. You know, this is really hard, and then you reframe it. Yeah, if I keep doing this, then I will improve. This is boring. Now, this is something that I really like. So, boring practice is really important. Okay, and here's some examples of some boring practice, or how I like to call them, world-class basics. So if I just click on there, then hopefully we'll see some of the keepers at school working every Monday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I've got 4 keepers in this session, and all the drills are fairly dull, you know. I mean, and you'd say that they're not particularly tough, but what we're working on here is world-class basics. That reverse one-hand catch is about creating as big a catching area as we possibly can when the ball goes one side of us, because often we only catch that ball with our other hand. So if we put 2 hands there, then we can take the nick off the edge of the bat, or if it deviates more. And exactly the same again, we're doing one-handed half volley drills. Here we go, half volley drills at pace, then one-handed doing the same. Look at that catching shape. We're looking for 90 degrees, and there's perfect catching shapes in there. We increase the pace. So this is world-class basics with a bit more pace and a bit more challenge put in. So these things they do at the start of their warm-ups. And initially, yes, it was coach-led, but now I don't have to say anything. They just get on and do it. The other thing that I've introduced to them is the notion of having failure as part of your practice. So a lot of people would think that, you know, a faultless practice is an indicator that you're going pretty well. Well, you're going pretty well to the level or the comfort level that you're putting on yourself. So one of the things in skill acquisition, and a guy called Danny Newcomb that I work with, and Matt Renshaw's dad over in Australia, they work collaboratively on skill acquisition stuff. And they talk a heap about introducing a minimum of 20% failure in any practice. So if the challenge goes up a little bit and you fail a little bit, actually that's a crucial way for you then to get better. Whereas if we have a practice where everything goes swimmingly and we haven't got enough challenge in there, then we're not going to develop at any sort of accelerated rate. So that's something that we've introduced, and I'll show you a bit on that a bit later. Because ultimately, every level that you climb up in your respective sport, the basics stay the same. The game doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the speed of the game. Every single sport. So if you think about tennis, what happens is the serve goes faster, the movement of the opponent is faster, the ball speed off of your forehand and your volley and everything is faster. And it's no different in my sport. The wingers in rugby and football get faster. The centre forwards get faster. Every level you go up, things speed up. And you've only got to watch, I suppose, Premiership football nowadays to see how that's changed. When they put all, you know, we're watching loads of retrospective stuff on Sky, and the game looks as if they're playing in treacle when you watch it from 10 years ago. And now the game is so much crisper because every level that you go up, you know, the introduction of people like Guardiola and Klopp into the English game have changed our mindset, and as a result the game is moving faster than it has before. And that's no different in cricket. You know, you go from county cricket to test match cricket. If you're a spinner in county cricket, you can operate between 45 mile an hour and 48 mile an hour and be blooming successful. But if you bowl that in international cricket, then you're probably going to go around the park. You need to be bowling it at 52. We know that. That's the way that we know that through research. So every level you go up, the game speeds up. So if you can put your world-class basics in, then add pace and introduce some failure, you'll be doing a great service for your players. And again, trying to do that reframing in language, every don't turn into a do. So the brain works much better in a positive rather than a negative fashion. So an example came when Ricky Ponting came to Somerset. You know, most people, they'll say, oh, when I go into bat, I'm not going to play at length balls outside off stump early. I don't want to be pushing at length balls outside off stump. Whereas his language was, I'm going to lead the ball aggressively early in my innings and send a positive message back to the bowler every single ball, which is this is what I'm going to do. It's not what I'm trying to avoid. This is what I'm going to do. And it's a lovely way of putting things. So hopefully when we hear some don'ts, we can go, yeah, but what are you going to do? Instead of what are you trying to avoid? And then we'll come on to the model of self-determination and how we apply that. Just reminds me of dodgy nightclubs in the 1990s, that. But ABC, so it is as easy as ABC, because the self-determination model is about autonomy, it's about belonging, it's about competence. And if those are being fulfilled, they are fundamental psychological needs that we all have, and social psychological needs that we all have. So if we understand those three and understand how we manipulate them, then there's a really good chance that we're going to get that buy-in and engagement from our players and our partners, being parents and clubs and media and all of that sort of thing. And you've only got to look at the way that Jurgen Klopp goes around his press conferences. He's engaging with the people around him because he wants them to be on his side and he wants them to be writing positive things about Liverpool. And I think he's a really good example of that. Sorry, my dogs are going ballistic in the background. I apologise for that. When people feel that they've got control and choice, feel as if they belong to a group, and recognised for their competencies. And those competencies don't necessarily need to be outcome-based. They can be process-based. And the more process-based you can make them, the better, really. Then they're more likely to be enthusiastic and motivated. So it is ABC, and we're going to look at those now. So autonomy, it means you're doing something because you want to. It's freedom to follow personal interests and base them around your personal values. And really, these are the types of bits of language that we don't want to be putting around people, because they will inhibit their intrinsic motivation, that motivation that comes from within, that inner drive, I suppose, to do stuff. So we've got to be mindful of that. And often, if we get autonomy right, then it leads to higher self-esteem, which is something, I suppose, in this more, we understand more about mental well-being. Self-esteem is actually really crucial within that. And the more that we can give people a cause for having good self-esteem through autonomy, the better in our planning of our programs. So here's some strategies that we can do around our planning of programming and around our application, which can help towards that. So involving the players within decision making is crucial. Not talking like I am doing at the moment, and asking for more student or player input. Being the facilitator within some higher level conversations. So you set the tone and then they do the feeding back, and you know, you can just be that sort of quiz master, really, that's pulling the strings. Use them to help from a discipline point of view. Have player-led sessions. Responsibilities, give them responsibilities, create some opportunities, and ask them at the end of each drill that you do, even if it's one that you've come up with yourself, you know, how would you make that more fun by 10%, more challenging by 10%? And that sort of stuff is really good. So we deal in 2-week blocks. If we do our own drill once, then we go, right, we want suggestions in by tomorrow afternoon of how we can make that better for next week. And again, you get more engagement next time round because they've made it part of their own. And often, as I experience a lot, the kids' drills are better than mine anyway. And then scoring schemes, you know, getting them to put together, they're much more imaginative. At the age of 47, my imagination isn't what it used to be. So I use their imagination to give me ideas instead. And going back to Joss, so Joss and then that lad next to him, Chris Jones, same age, we used to have a thing called Open Cupboard Wednesdays, which is basically I'm coaching the second team at Somerset. That would finish about 6 o'clock, but the academy session would start at 5. I'd go into the hall, and they would have had an hour's worth of just playtime, really, where they had the cupboard was open and they could get any bit of kit out that they wanted to. And on this one particular Wednesday, Joss and Chris Jones were doing some ridiculous stuff. They had a bowling machine at about 55, 60 mile an hour, and they were flipping the balls over the top of their shoulders. So I went over and said, you know, well, what's this all about? And Joss said, I was playing hockey yesterday and a guy went round me. I was playing at the back. He went round me. He was too good for me. but I ran back because I wanted to see if I could clear it off the line if the goalkeeper pushed him out wide, which he did, and the ball got whacked towards me, and it actually went where I didn't expect it to. So it hit the end of my stick, it flew over my shoulder, hit the crossbar and went over. And as it did that, I thought, oh, that's an interesting way of playing a cricket ball. So I came the next day and they practiced this over and over and over and over again, and got some mastery at it. And you know, he's now become synonymous. He's almost changed the game, in fact, with that shot, which started with basically me not being in the hall, him having autonomy to do what he wanted to within an open cupboard session, and creativity and ownership came off of it. You know, and he's taken that to a new level. And now most players around the world have done it, but it was him that sort of took it to that level, which made it acceptable. So open cupboard looks like this in our environment. You have an entry price. We've got a board in the indoor cricket centre. You have to get your name up there on by Thursday breakfast time with what you're going to work on in the session. So we have a session on Thursday lunchtime and a session on Friday. Your name's got to be up there. And you know, if we take one of these here, we've got Barney over here. He's playing spin and he wants to decide whether to go forward or back. So he's going to give himself, you know, marks against choosing the right option to go forward or back. And simple as that. He might have a bowling machine on the Merlin bowling machine. He might have somebody throwing at him. He might have somebody batting against him. But he set his own theme that he wants to work on. And the engagement that we see in sessions are great. And recently we had a level 3 in at school, a course in at school, and the only time the kids could get in was at lunchtime. And all the level 3 coaches stayed around and watched it. And my 3 coaches didn't get anywhere near the session. We just stood at the back. And the rules of engagement are we only get involved if you ask us to get involved. And more often than not, we don't get involved, and we just stand there and watch and admire what they're doing. So that's an open cupboard session. It grew from the Joss Buttler days, but it's one of our best sessions in a week, and ultimately the coaches don't do anything in it. We do IDPs, so independent development plans, and here's Tom's one. So Tom's a 14-year-old bowler. He's having his bowling screening out in the middle at Somerset in his picture. He put this in together, so we've given him just a little framework, and then it's down to him. So he puts down some information in here, you know, what was his player name, what his role is, what his ultimate vision is. It just gives us a bit of a flavour of where he's going. So when we have coaching conversations and maybe tough conversations about some of his behaviours, whether he's chosen to do something or not chosen, we link it back to this because they're his words. And then he's put together some plans. Now he's an opening bowler, he bats at 11. He isn't particularly a great batter, but he wants to be one, which is great. So he wants to be a better batter for the teammate at the other end and to help the team to go forward. So he wanted a world-class defensive game around his own game. So he's written all this stuff. He's actually scrawled his own image of himself and what he wants to achieve. Notice that they're not what I don't want to do, it's what I do want to do. And that was what he worked on last winter in all of his batting sessions. That was his image of what he wanted to create. And he's got pretty close to it, to be fair to him. And then bowling-wise, he wanted to develop his slower balls. So he's got Bumrah there, who's one of his idols. And how he was going to go about it, and also that he wants to have more than one option when he's bowling his slower balls as well in terms of the fields, and also having different options of ball that he could bowl at different batters. Again, very much self-led. We go with it as a coaching team, but his engagement with us has been phenomenal. And then the other thing was about running in faster. So he used to have quite a stuttery run-up, so he wanted to do a bit of work both in the gym but also technically on what he was doing as well. And again, by depicting this, it enables him to put this on his fridge. So every time he goes to get something out of the fridge, there he's got his 3 different points that he's working with in order to remind him every day of what he's meant to be doing. And it's worked really well, not just for him, but also for a lot of the players that we're working with. And I think back to the England and Ireland days, we never had IDPs. You know, we just coached. We just did that. And this sort of thing really makes sure that you stay on track, but also it puts it in the frame of the player rather than always as the coaches, which gives them that autonomy and that buy-in. The other thing we do is every September they have some time away from playing, and we set them some targets and some things like research projects. So this year we wanted to focus on T20 cricket. We've been really successful in T20 cricket, but we wanted to become even more so. And as the 100 was coming in, we wanted those skills to develop as well to give our players more option. So we had Adam and Joseph, who are up here. They did one on scoring boundaries and how important it was to hit more sixes, because that's the way the game's going now. Often people are hitting the same amount of boundaries in a game, but there was quite a big gap because somebody's hit 12 sixes as opposed to hitting 2. So we wanted to have a look at that and see how we compared with the best players and the best teams in the world, and then have a look at the techniques that they had that underpinned their performance. So they put that together and presented it to the coaches first, then to their teammates, and off the back of it, we've built some striking programs which have paid us fairly good dividends so far. And then Callum over here, he's doing a similar thing about the value of a dot ball and how you can increase pressure on the opposition in T20 context. And if you can string together 1 or 2 dot balls at certain times, then it gives you a better chance of a wicket being created. Again, fantastic work, which has then changed the way we've gone about our bowling practice in T20 sessions that we've scheduled. It's all been geared around their research. The buy-in has been phenomenal. The reviews, so it's easy for a coach to stand up the front and reel off about 5 or 6 things that you want to do. But I learned this from a guy called Steve Bull, who was England's sports psychologist for 10, 11 years, and we've put it into place really well. And you know, as you can see on the right hand side, Adam there is under 14s. He's running his own review session where he's basically drawing out through stop 3 things that we want to stop, 3 things we want to start, and 3 things, well, he's actually put 5 in here, but we try to limit it to 3 things that you want to try and continue from one game to another. And anything that comes up more than once, we obviously then put a session in to try and sort that particular thing out. But what we find is that performance has become a little bit more consistent, particularly at younger ages where it can be a bit sporadic in the way that they play. It's beginning to pay massive dividends. And again, because they're leading it, our job, the only thing that we do is we only come in if they get off track. That's it. And then we ask the question and facilitate it back. But this has been one of the biggest things that we've done at Millfield Cricket in terms of developing their understanding and their engagement in the tactical side of the game in particular. Interestingly, I do some work with Exeter Chiefs, who are a phenomenal organisation, you know, small club that's grown into one of the dominant forces within Europe of rugby. And I go in and work with the coaches, and it, you know, ultimately I learn more probably from being around them than they do from me. But it's great to be able to go in there every other week and work with them, and they do exactly the same thing. So their player group is massively strong in reviewing, and then the coaches put some strategies and the training stuff around their reviews, which it was lovely to see from a synergy point of view. So belonging. Well, belonging is a crucial element of human motivation. In a sport context, this is really about how the athlete feels that they're cared for, how they're respected, and how they're connected both into their teammates, for their peers, for the coaches and the club. And I think we can all relate to that. You know, I lost the other day my best teacher that I ever had passed away, and he did all of those things. He certainly cared for all of the people that he worked with. We had great respect for him, and he had great respect for us, and unbelievable connections. And you know, I was no academic by any stretch of imagination, but he got more performance out of me than anybody else. And I think that's the same for coaches. Malcolm Marshall did it very much for me when I played for him at Hampshire as well. And then there's some real good linkage into how good our relationships and our feeling of belonging as children in particular with adults, whether it be coaches, teachers, or parents, and very importantly parents actually, because of that time that they have at the start of their lives. If that is managed well, then the opportunity for them to develop learning capacities and skills and strategies going forward is massive. So belonging is huge. So some strategies that we put in place around belonging, cooperative learning, so getting them to learn from each other, with each other, helping each other is massive. Homework that involves other people within the family, so sending them away with cricket-based homework that mum and dad can get involved with. Some drills that they can do in their backyard, which is obviously really important in our current circumstances. It's been great watching the parents getting stuck into the drills and the players really benefiting from that relationship. Having diversity, so giving them some other areas of cricket that they wouldn't normally go to. Now, coaching has been our main one, probably because I'm passionate about coaching, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But creating athlete voice, I think, is crucial as well. And that can come through management groups, it can come through cricket councils, which again we've got at school, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute, but also within sessions. Also at the end of sessions, as a group sessions, it's getting player feedback and sort of a hot debrief, I suppose, with player feedback, write it up on the board, and then we can go away and deal with it. But also doing one or two, what are your key learnings from the session that you've just had? And they write that down in Microsoft Teams, which then collates a log that they've got available to them, we've got available to them, to get their key reflections, which I think is really crucial in terms of belonging. So what does it look like? Well, we do a lot of touring. We take 45 kids away every second year, and their parents as well. We go somewhere really nice. We play 6 games of cricket. We do loads of educational stuff. We do loads of charity stuff, and we do loads of cultural stuff, because it's not just good enough to go on tour and just play cricket all the time. The learning opportunities you leave behind if you do that are huge. We have fundraising drives. We have a charity, associated charity, every year at Millfield Cricket, and we've done some pretty good things, pretty funky things. Cricket Council, we host matches, not just when we're playing against people, but also for the ECB, and everybody gets involved in that. Coaching, buddying up, dinners, all of the usual stuff is all that everybody does, is a part of the belonging, but it's crucial. I hope you understand how that helps them to feel as if they are autonomous, and if they're engaged in their whole coaching process. So this is our Cricket Council, not an adult in sight. We've got boys and girls from all of the age groups at school. We've got 5 age groups at school. Some of these are top end players playing in our A sides. Some of them are Bs and C team players. Some of them have skills around scoring and umpiring. Some of them have interest in just being the funny person, which is what Canvir over here, who's an absolute belter, is on it for, just to make sure it's lightened up. But this is the minutes from their meeting they had in October, and some suggestions which are absolutely brilliant. And the red stuff is the things that we put in place. So if we just look at the top one, lower teams, by that Max means B sides, C sides, D sides, feel that they like a sharper element to their coaching, and the teachers are generally in charge of that, and they'd like their teachers to be exposed to some more top end coaching work. So our professional coaches on Mondays afternoons go into all of the B, C's and D sides and work with the coaches and the players within those environments. And then if we've had a double weekend, Saturday, Sunday, all of the Mayor's 11, which is my top team, our under 18 team, will go into those sides and do exactly the same as well. So it gives them a little bit more. And you can see there that the Cricket Council are having a huge impact on our programme. And again, that gives a sense of belonging and buy-in. There's some charity stuff that we've done over the years, huge amounts of money being raised by pupils really engaging in that process and enjoying the giving back and supporting other people. Our latest one is to support the Ruth Strauss Foundation, which is obviously close to my heart, but is doing some incredible work around some of the rarer forms of cancer and the support to families now. And the buy-in for that has just been off the charts. It's been incredible. And then we do coaching. Coaching's massive. So in sixth form, I give them the opportunity to go on level 1s, level 2 coaching courses. We run them all at school through the Somerset Cricket Board. Our numbers have been unbelievable. And then they go and get deployed into the local cricket clubs and all-stars. We invite state schools into our school because they haven't got the facilities like Millfield has to enjoy. And the super ones is the Lord's Taverners Disabilities coaching, and we get our kids involved in that as well. And again, it's so rewarding for all of them. And you can see here Harry, who's an absolute superstar, plays in our second and third teams, loves his cricket, is going to be a phenomenal cricket coach. And that's the way that we try and engage him and develop him. He's going to be a good cricketer as well. It's just going to take him a bit longer to get there, but he's enjoying that whole process, which I think is crucial. And then our tours, this is our India tour from a few years ago, 45 players, we go away. We have a coaching charity day. You can see here we're working with a load of youngsters, and it's brilliant for our kids because it gives them diversity, it gives them a bit of perspective, it gives them a bit of context and a bit of responsibility as well. And then they bring that back, and we notice a discernible change in the way they go about their own training as a result. And here we go again. We've got some parents that are over with us getting involved. And the upshot of it is one of the teachers from the schools that we work with actually taught our guys and girls to Bollywood dance, and we had a big production outside around the pool for the whole of the hotel. So again, really getting into that culture, it develops that sense of belonging. And then the buddy up scheme. Well, I learned this when I was with England. So we had a buddy up scheme with England, and I'd actually left England by this point. But in the previous winter, Paul Collingwood here on the right had worked significantly with Monty Panesar, and I think the proudest bloke on the ground in Cardiff when this all happened, and England had to bat out for a draw, was Collie. Monty wasn't the best with the bat, it has to be said. Not the best judge of a run either. So this stuff is crucial. You know, there's so much experience in somebody like Paul Collingwood, and he would finish his practice session, and the first thing he would do was go over and work with Monty on his batting, knowing full well at some stage that might bear fruit. And so we've taken that on, and we do exactly the same in our environment. So top order batters coach lower order, senior spinners buddy up with junior spinners, and then we give them some questions to ask and feedback loops to try and create amongst that group. And it's been absolutely brilliant because it connects the juniors with the seniors and vice versa. It makes it feel like one club and everybody's working forward, because ultimately we are a cricket club that are working towards the same thing. But we give them a little bit of framework, but it's just been magnificent to watch the way that the kids have gone about it. And here's some examples. I mean, this middle one here, this lad's England under 19 opening bowler. He's working with a lad here who's just started batting. So, you know, he's only just started playing the game, yet we've got a bloke that's an international cricketer working with that player and loving the process. And the nice thing is that they're both connected now, because they both have some challenges around classroom stuff. Both have got some learning difficulties, and they're working together on their diaries and what have you to make sure that those learning outcomes are achieved. You've got two bowlers here looking at slower balls, and then you've got two guys here working on their batting, and we do that a heap. You know, they have sessions which are designated towards that. And then the other bit that we do in terms of belonging is give them the opportunity every now and again to come up with games. And as I said earlier, they're far more creative than I ever will be. So they built one around the film Hunger Games, and you know, you can have a read of stuff, but ultimately when you have a number of points against 2 or 3 variables, you're not allowed to bowl wides or no balls, or you know, if you do that then you lose your life. And ultimately when your lives have all gone, one of the injured players will play the Hunger Games music, and they'd have to go out of the room or out the hall and then reconvene at 5 to 7, where we do a big review at the end. And you know, I thought that was quite a lovely game, and they always ask for that. And normally near the end of terms is a bit of a reward for working really hard. So what's competence? Well, competence happens when somebody experiences pride and seeing their accomplishments and notices their own improvement. And the upshot of that is when people feel comfortable and confident with their ability, they are available for new information. And that's the time to stick something a bit funkier or something a little bit more advanced on top of them. So it's a good time to build enhanced or new skills. And then this is fantastic research, I think, which is coming out of a lot of areas at the moment, is if you congratulate somebody for doing something that they initiated themselves, then they get an increased feeling of competency and ultimately motivation. However, if you put a session on them and you dictated the terms to them and then you give them presence, it actually can decrease their confidence and also decrease their motivation to want to play or to push themselves or whatever the case may be, because you've taken away that element of choice. So I thought that was quite interesting. So how do we go about it? We do a lot of this stuff where we just basically give them a camera to watch themselves and then to do their own reviews of themselves ball by ball. So we've got Alex here, who's left arm seamer in under 14s, plays in Guernsey. He's been left to his own devices, and he's allowed to call us over if he spotted something or he wants to discuss something. Equally, we've got down here, we've got bowlers setting their own fields in sessions and setting their own scenarios up on our whiteboards, which effectively is an A4 bit of paper with a laminate cover over the top that they can wipe clean and go over and over again. But again, it gives them a bit of autonomy, but also it gives them the opportunity to explore some new ideas and to self-assess, which is really important. So it gives us the opportunity not to intervene as much as we would do normally. Problem solving is increased, more self-assessment, and then we have to be mindful of when we intervene, and if there is a point that we do need to intervene, if they're obviously going banging their head against a brick wall and getting frustrated. And we give them scenarios. So, for example, I do one where, you know, the Mike Gatting Shane Warne ball of the century. I'd say you're the next batter in. This has just happened. This is a game context. What's your game plan? Can you build a game plan? Can you have a look at this field that's placed around you? How are you going to go about it? How are you going to survive? How are you going to thrive? Tell me how you're going to go about it, but be really succinct with it. And it gives them the opportunities to really improve their competence levels. And then the other one is just about language, really. So if somebody says to me that they feel something, I can't argue against it. Equally, when I tell them somebody that I feel that this is happening, they can't argue against me, because a feeling is very individual, isn't it? You know, and we can't look inside somebody and tell them what's going on, because if we do that, then we strip away their levels of competency. So be careful with that, but any strategies that you can get them to self-assess, I think, is a really good thing to do. So I set them tasks like this. Let's have a listen to this.
With this shot, it is important that you play with a full back face to minimise any chances of an edge and possibly a catch. If it is wide, you can free your arms and cut it, but not if you don't have the room.
So I'm testing there, really, and asking him to demonstrate his competency, not just in his ability to be able to hit a ball off of a crazy catch, but also to understand how and why he's doing it, because those whys and those hows are crucial when they get out into the middle. I can't influence what they do when they go over the white line, but what I can do is create an environment which means that they're problem solving, they're working out, they have a good understanding of their own game. So when things go wrong out in the middle, or you feel like you're batting or bowling in somebody else's body, you've got some strategies to be able to put yourself right, self-coach yourself, because your competency levels of doing that and your understanding it is good enough. So I set those types of drills heap. I've just set this one up really for the reward bit. You know, reward the process rather than the outcome as much as you can, because that has a good knock-on effect to their competency levels. Because sometimes when people reward their outcome, somebody might go, oh, yeah, because it's just because I'm good at that, and that's not good enough, because that's not actually going to build some robust belief. That's almost bullshitty type belief. Whereas if you praise somebody for their effort and how they've worked through a problem and all of those types of things in terms of process, then that gives them a real something to do when they get out in the middle and they're put under pressure. And then the other thing is something that I was introduced by this guy on the left-hand side, Dave Allred, who was Johnny Wilkinson's kicking coach, and also Padraig Harrington's mental skills coach, and Luke Donald as well. Fantastic bloke, quite out there, I have to say. But he talks about the canyon of the mind and filling the canyon with as many valid facts and bits of information as possible. So we have here up in the top, we have some trackers of performance. Now, here's the Manhattan that we saw with Sachin Tendulkar earlier, and this is Sam's, I think. But also some trackers in terms of strike rates and average, and just to seeing how you're going along time. Because all of these things, if they're on the up, then obviously they're positives and they can go into the canyon of the mind. We film every game and we score every game on a thing called pitch vision. And again, they can look back on every single ball and they can review their own competency levels, and they can have some autonomy in their own reviews of their games because they can see it there. Here we've put together a 6 montage, you know, and that's nice. That's a nice confidence boosting thing, obviously. But we've also got pitch vision in every lane, which means that we can almost lead them to their own devices for them to run their own session. We might help them to put the parameter in, but they can be running a session as we're working with somebody else over there, and then they can be reviewing in between each ball what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong, and they need to try and develop upon. So they're good tools, and we might talk about that later. But having tools like that, and some of them are really expensive. This stuff's relatively expensive, but there are other ones out there which are relatively cheap. But I think of the next thing in coaching. So Max here is a really interesting one. So Max came from the prep school. I've worked with him since he was year 6. He's now in year 13. So we've had quite a long time together. He's just about to leave the school. So he had a challenge with his foot down here, actually, with his right foot, in how it would land and how it would move. And he had some deficiencies in there, which our physio staff have worked through, our S&C staff have worked through, but more importantly, Max is really engaged in this process. So he had movement challenges. He couldn't field, he couldn't run when he first got to the senior school, but he's worked incredibly hard. So down here, we've got a table of scores, and these scores are basically a 2K. I mean, it's one of our fitness tests, but running 2K as quickly as you can, so a time trial. And it's something that England have been doing quite a lot of recently. And the two big scorers, the people that smash everybody off the park, are Josh Buttler and Ben Stokes. And Ben Stokes has gone to a different level, you know. But interestingly, in this one that I took a picture of Max, he beat Ben Stokes' record by 5 seconds, which is ridiculous. And it shows how hard he's worked. But what he's done is create a training diary for himself, which is filling facts and information and valid stuff into it all the time. So target scores, when he bowls at targets, when he throws to hit stumps, when he does catching stuff, he keeps a note of how he's gone in each of those and puts them in. His times for sprints, his weights that he's pushing, his distances, his accuracy, his drill scores. So he creates a game around every drill that he's doing, makes a note, does it again in 4 weeks, sees whether he's improving or not. His flexibility, which was a big part of what he was doing with the physios, you know, again, there's measures that come out of that in terms of his range of movement. He makes notes of that. So again, all of this stuff, it helps to give them a sense of competency if they can see things working in the right direction. But they've got to be recorded. And more importantly, from my point of view, if the player can take the ownership, as Max has done, to put that into his own training diary, rather than it being something that we do for him, you see gains which go from I can't run at all to I'm beating Ben Stokes' time in a 2K time trial. And then sort of coming towards the end, really, here's a video of a session that I ran a couple of weeks ago, actually. And when I say I ran it, I said to them, right, you can do whatever you want in the session. We've got 45 minutes. I'd encourage you to be creative. And that was literally how I did it. Now, you saw the start of it, which was them doing their world-class basics and doing them really well. Hopefully, you'll see some stuff at the end, which is a bit more funky. So this mat here has got ridges on it, and the ball goes on all over the place off of it. So you're likely to miss quite a lot of balls, and all of these techniques are being built off of those world-class basics. So here's the little lad that you saw. He started keeping wicket last year. He's actually a hockey player, but he's doing some really funky things and he's really engaging in it. So world-class basics impacting upon everything that he does. He's desperate to get the secondary catch. We love that. Look at the way he's reacting. It's just great. Ball goes off a stump, dives and takes it. Okay, training the brain to recognize opportunity. That's massively important. Look at that ball stay down. Then Charlotte comes in. This girl couldn't catch a cold 2 years ago, and now look at her. It's fantastic what she's achieved. And then, of course, it's their session. So can they increase the challenge? Can they create the 20% worth of failure and then get better as a result? And they do that pretty well. Back to little Lysander. He's an absolute legend and a character, as we can see there. And again, he's creating challenge. He doesn't want to catch every ball. He wants to be able to miss a ball and then come back strong, which was something that I didn't do as a keeper pretty well. So that's the session that they did the other day. And then really just to sum up where we've gone in this presentation, hopefully, here's a few of my pillars. You know, nothing's right, but here's a few of my pillars. Hard work for me, it's a non-negotiable, it's a prerequisite. Role modeling is crucial. Let me come back, sorry, I've just gone one. Role modeling is crucial. That can be me, it can be my staff, and more importantly, as time's gone by, it's been our players. So as players are going through the school, they're seeing some really good role models, and more of them are doing the right thing. And now we've got, 15, 20 pupils at the top end of the school, as opposed to 1 or 2 that are doing the right thing. And that number, hopefully, will only keep increasing. This is something that I got from Ireland, making the most of every pound and euro. When I got to Ireland, I had a budget of 775,000, which sounds quite a lot, for the whole of Irish cricket, from somebody that would start playing the game for the first time when they walk into Cork Harlequins cricket club for the first time at the age of 11, through to my World Cup superstars. That's all I had. It was the same budget that England under-19s had for their program, which just put it into context. So I got pretty good at working with the likes of Sport Northern Ireland, the Irish Sports Council, and RSA, and our other sponsors, of creating more money. But then every time I went to the players and went to the clubs and went to the unions, I'd be saying, right, can we multiply let's turn this pound or this euro into £4 or €4 worth of output. And I don't think I've ever worked in an environment which has been so effective at doing that. So I've taken that monetary element and put it into seconds. Can you make the most of every second that you're in our environment? We have lots of 45-minute sessions at school. You know, we've got 4,500 seconds. Can you make the most of every single one? Hopefully you've seen there, learning how to embrace failure is the best teacher you will ever have, by creating that challenge of 20% above what we can do to see if we can bridge that gap. And then how quickly do I shift and adapt to that new, tougher situation and challenge? And the research which is coming out now about people that make transitions and keep going that way are the ones that find it challenging and then find solutions the quickest. So rarely will you have somebody who fails completely when they first come in for a period of time, who doesn't learn quickly, who will stay in that environment. They normally get dropped. So most people find it tough, find some solutions, and then they end up becoming really good at that level and keep going. So I think that's important. Learning from your mates and your peers, I think, is crucial. You know, if you can't do something, have a look around you, because I'm sure you'll find somebody who can, and then copy them, ask them how they go about it, and then learn, I think is massively important. The ability to review and reflect, so that when you walk out of a hall or a cricket ground one day, that you come back in a more informed cricketer or sports person when you come back the next time. There's no point in doing that sort of Groundhog Day thing where you come into the hall one day and you go through, you get slightly better, and then the next day you come back in and you return back to that point where you were 2 days before. We're not developing. We're not going to help ourselves, you know, with our goals. So we've always got to go away, review, reflect, walk in at least at the point that you left the last session, hopefully with a little bit of enhancement, and then all of a sudden we get those step changes that we're looking for. And then in terms of sport, I mean, understanding that there's no guarantees in sport. You can prepare as well as you want, but you know, something might go wrong. All you're doing is giving yourself the best chance of success. And those are my pillars for high performance environments. And that is me.